All right, so day number 20 is not necessarily in the books yet. I am taking a prolonged break over lunch hour. I'm not officially locking it out yet. There is a chance that I will go back and possibly trade the power hour, but for now, this is my result that I have. I took 4 trades today, and the reason I'm taking the break and the reason I shut it down for the time being is the relationship between the commissions and the gross P&L. I felt that I mismanaged a couple of trades, took a lot of thin setups, my share size was too small, and there was a couple things that I didn't really like about what I was doing. Even though my accuracy is pretty decent, I decided let's just take a step back and avoid taking questionable setups that I thought I may be leaning towards. So my first trade on NAVB was pretty early out of the gates, only the 3rd minute into the day. As you can see marked on my 1-minute chart here, I took the first entry of 500 shares at 120. Immediately fell into a little bit of consolidation here on the next few candles, but then got a strong push upwards. And as we broke the existing high of day, which was the result of a very strange open, where going into the bell, the closing price was 113, and then it suddenly gapped up all the way to 124 for unknown reasons. But in any case, there was a large seller at 125, and as I saw that was about to break, I did hit the buy key to get another 250 shares to add to the position. And this brought my average up to 121.67, which I was okay with because my target had been 35. This was only really intending to be a scalp pretty much the whole way through. And what ended up happening, as is very clearly illustrated on the 1-minute chart here, up at 28, you can see it kept bouncing off 28, coming back down to 23, bouncing off 28, and doing the same thing. And as soon as we broke 28 and didn't follow through, I decided to exit for half. And I top ticked this on both my exits, really. The first one was, there was another block of sellers up at 130. I saw some resistance overhead above that, and I decided, I don't really like this. Let's lighten the load a little bit here and reevaluate to see how it reacts coming back down. And it did come back down all the way to 118. Initially, I had a stop at 123, which I decided was a pretty key level. This was support based off previous resistance, and I tried to stop the remaining half of my position as we broke down here through 123. I did not get filled, and I decided to just give it a second, see what happens, see how it reacts. And I did like the reaction, so I continued holding. But nevertheless, my plan on this was basically to just get out. By this point in the trade, I had realized that I hated the level 2. I hated the thickness of the tape. The float, it seemed to me, was a lot higher than the 11.6 million that was advertised. It was definitely trading like a 35, 40 million share float. And that's not the kind of situation that I'm looking for. So when it popped back up into the 20s, the high 20s, and I saw another opportunity to get out just below 128, or 129 rather, I took it. And fast hands led to a good exit on that one. So I got filled at 128 on the last piece. And this turned into, a $40 winner on basically a failed scalp, or a scalp where half my target was met. Now, I don't have a whole lot to say about my short on XNet. The most notable thing, I think, are the problems I had with getting filled on my initial entry. My initial entry was supposed to be 250 shares at or below 470. And at the time that I had planned that, I didn't realize that SSR was on. And I probably tried maybe half a dozen times in between 470 and 445 to take that initial entry. And by the time I actually did get filled, it was a partial fill. I only got 100 out of the 250 that I was asking for. And I ended up canceling the order because I realized that I had slid so far towards my target that it didn't make sense for me to take that kind of size anymore, and that I was getting really far away from my stop, and that the whole situation was becoming a bit dangerous. Now, I ended up adding on pretty well. I got a top tick on this one. Finally, I had realized that SSR was on. I cut my game plan in half. I was initially planning on building a 500 share position. I decided to cap it at 200. And so this add-on right here at 465, this was intended to be only 100 shares. That is the order I put in. And everything went okay on the fill there. And so I continued holding, waiting for the breakdown. Now, the problem we received on this one was that there was a very large order at 440. It was 110,000 shares roughly. and it was having a lot of trouble breaking. You can see that, there was a great breakdown in through this area here. We retested successfully on the way back up and then, started breaking down again. But then we kept having these bounces as reactions to the bidder at 440, which I was not super stoked about. And I began to think that I can't possibly bring this trade past 430. I looked on the full depth of the level 2 and saw that after 440 there was another big bid at 430. And so I thought, unless we get some kind of rug pull situation where all the bidders just disappear, I really don't like my chances of being filled below 430. I thought that 430 made the most sense as a bounce spot if we did eventually get the breakdown through that seller at 440. Now, sadly, I ended up getting spooked on this one. There was a really thin period of consolidation right here between 440 and 442. And as strong volume came into the buying side, I thought, yeah, this could be exactly the type of short squeeze that I might be interested if I were looking long on this. And I thought this was going to be the beginning of a very intense rip, and I didn't want any part of that. And so I decided to just stop out in the profit zone at 444 for the whole position. And, it ended up popping up to 450. And then finally we got that break of 440 back down to 430. So this is the break I was waiting for to cover my entire position. I ended up stopping out a few minutes before that. I'm not super disappointed in this. I do think, logically I should have held longer. But at the same time, I had been holding this position for quite a while, and I hadn't intended it to be such a long-term trade. And whenever that happens, I always think to myself, well, your idea clearly didn't unfold the way that you thought it would. And if it didn't unfold the way you thought it would, then it can reverse even worse, I mean, I'm a big fan of having really well-developed plans, but also at the same time, plans are the primary purpose of a plan is to throw it out and adjust later. And I think that's true in all cases, not just in trading. And in this case, my adjustment was to just bail out, take the green that I had, and move on to whatever else I could find in the market. Now, once I closed my XNet trade, I looked around and I saw two old friends. Hey, SES and BIMI, which that's the way I look at them. They're like two old buddies who hang out with each other a lot, and they always do the same thing. And if I flip back between the charts, I'll see this day was no exception. They've done it multiple times in the past, ever since SES started the momentum. And just look at this. The 5-minute chart is especially noticeable here. And I missed all this initial run, which is a shame because I really would have liked it, especially the pattern on SES here. But in any case, at around 10:30, all of my focus shifted towards those two names because I knew they had potential, even though there may be absolutely no fundamental catalyst present, and there were probably even some bag holders up above. I mean, these two names have a history of running, and it's clear that traders in the market are quick to jump on them. And most importantly is that they are capable of producing the type of follow-through that lets me scale really aggressively into a trade and to do so safely. And that's something I haven't been able to find lately. I've been struggling with these scalps here and there, just trying to make $50 a day or, $100 here or whatever. And this to me, I got excited because I was like, oh, finally something I can play with my true style. Now, the problem with these ones is that I only noticed them late. And in order for me to be able to profit from an entry at the time that I did take them, I really had to see substantial follow-through, like runaway follow-through. And I chose to go with BIMI first because that was the one that was trailing SES. SES was really leading the show, and then BIMI was following behind. And you can kind of see that just based on where they're up throughout the day. In that SES really did start the party. If I switch back to the chart too and you look at the times, you'll notice that as well. But on BIMI, you can see that my entry was looking pretty sketchy on the chart in any case. But this was a purely price action type entry. The speed of the ramp up, the volume pattern, the complexion of the level 2, everything to me was pointing towards a long body candle was about to form. It seemed like this topping tail right here on the 1-minute chart at 10:35, it seemed like this was just going to be a temporary pullback before a really substantial explosion. and that didn't end up being the case. You can see my entry was at 510, and I only took 125 shares, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But once we squeezed up to 526, I noticed some things in the tape in the level 2 that I didn't like. I started realizing, okay, maybe you're overreaching here. This is a bit of a chasey entry. And, let's keep a close eye on how things develop, because if this starts to go south, you need to get out fast. And things did start to go south fast on the very next candle. And the place that I was thinking in my head, okay, my new stop is this. It had started out at 498, and I was quick to move it up to 520 after we broke 520 because of bid support that was on the level 2. Now, I tried to get out the moment that I saw 520 breaking and that I saw a lull in the action. There was still volume coming in, but the volume wasn't pushing the price higher. And this kind of negated my plan going into this trade. I really needed to see instant resolution on this in order to justify the risk that I was taking in getting in. And I didn't see that. So what I decided to do was just cut the whole trade at 520. And yeah, I would make a bit of profit or whatever. It would have been like $10 or something. But that wasn't the point. This was a super highly anticipatory entry for a much greater move. And it was a move that never happened. And probably the most interesting thing about this trade, to me anyway, is that I eventually got filled down at 503. I had started hitting sell at 520. And, just a few fractions of a second later, the whole bid side gets washed out. And I'm very aware of this. I was aware of this going in. I'm aware of these types of stocks. I really like these types of stocks. And I'm quite experienced in playing them. And one thing I know for sure about these is that no matter how bad it gets, it can always get worse, and it can get worse extremely quickly. And, that's part of the attraction to the upside, too. It's a low floater, and that's just generally how they move. But because the bid side was so light, and because the volume was high going up, I knew that there would be people holding that would want to start stopping out below $5, and I did not want to let myself be caught in missing a bunch of entries in between 5 and let's say 5 or 450. And this may not be super obvious to you because you're not me. Unlike you, I know myself very well, and I have a very clear personality trait, especially in simulators in the past where I've tried different things out. And even in this simulator, I think I've done it a couple times where I have a tendency to, once I surpass my planned primary hard stop, if I ever surpass that and don't get a clean fill, I have a tendency to start making excuses for myself. I have a tendency to, okay, well, let's just go to the next price level and bounce off, see if we can get a bounce off that. And then we don't. And then we break down below that one. And then I keep doing that. And sometimes it leads to runaway losses. Not so much in recent months or recent years, but in the beginning, that was a really big struggle for me. And there are still kind of remnants of that attitude left in my game plan. And the way that I deal with that is to take these profitable stop out spots. I mean, in this case on BMI, it wasn't actually profitable. I, lost 7 cents per share or whatever. But the next one on SES is exactly one of those spots where I felt myself kind of approaching the danger zone, and I knew that I wouldn't be comfortable below my entry, and I would be especially not comfortable below my initial stop. And because these are low floats and because they can move quickly and the bid sides can just wash out instantly and all of a sudden you could be halted going down or something crazy, then I thought, okay, let's just get out. And this didn't do what I want. I was wrong. Let's get out and just move on. Now, this comparison may not, it's probably going to, be relatable to nobody. But in my history, at least, I have a long history of both playing poker and dealing poker. And I think there's a really clear parallel here in that when you're sitting in the dealer seat at a poker table, it's unbelievable how you know everybody's hand. You can pick up on little tells that you wouldn't normally be able to pick up on. And you think to yourself like, oh my God, I'm such a genius. I could crush these people. And you go play against those same people. And then all of a sudden you notice that, wait a minute, where did all my reading power go? How come I don't know what everybody has? And the reason for that is because you're distracted by pressure and you're distracted by information that you're studying very intently. And you're also distracted by information you wouldn't normally have. On the poker side, that information is typically your cards. That's not something you have as a dealer. You don't have your own cards to worry about. You don't have your own chips to worry about. And so all of your focus can be laid on reading other people. And the equivalent in trading is that you don't have a P&L to be glancing at. You don't have a number of shares to keep an eye on, or whatever it is. It's the same type of your specific information that you don't have. And so the reason why I often take these kind of stop outs, these profitable failures as I call them, is because I'm way better at reading the situation when I'm not in the trade. And so my approach and the way that I've come up with to fix this pattern that I used to have, really a really developed pattern back in the day, the approach that I've taken to fixing this is to get out and get back in. And that's exactly what I tried to do on both these trades. Now, in the case of SES, you can see that I did jump in on a high volume spike at 780, which turned out to be a great entry. I timed that very well. We broke out to 808, and I was feeling really good about it. I was just getting ready to add going into the break of the high of day, and that's when we got a little bit of sideways consolidation, which I thought was unreasonable given the lack of move up since the bottom here at 746. I thought, no, that doesn't make sense. We need to go higher before we get substantial consolidation. And that's when I started kind of like second guessing my plan, because that pattern is one that I recognize as a pending reversal. And so what I ended up doing here is, as we broke out again and hit 824, which did break the previous high of day, and then we shot all the way back down to 790, which was the opening price of the candle, I ended up just bailing out completely. Now, I fast forward the 1 minute chart a little bit, so you can see that I bottom ticked this at 790 and then it ran up to 840. Now, I don't think I ever would have got filled up in the 30s or at 840, but I do think I would have been able to manage a stop out in the 20s that would have been a little bit better for the P&L. But whatever the case, whatever the possible futures or alternate histories, ignoring all of that stuff, this trade did kind of trigger a little bit of FOMO inside me. I started thinking, okay, what else we got? Like, where's the next setup? And just wanting to revenge trade a little bit. And that's when I locked my level 2 and stepped away, and I took a break outside. And when I came back in from outside, that's when I decided to take a prolonged break and to wait until later in the afternoon to even really take another look. So to summarize this day, the first thing I'd say about it is that I'm happier about today than I was with yesterday, and that's not because of the P&L or the net ROE or anything like that. It's just because yesterday I had a really good trade in the morning. My first trade was really good, and then I proceeded to give it back on questionable trades. Today, I kind of had not a lot to work with to begin with, but I navigated at least my first 2 trades fairly well given the problems that I had. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I want to see from myself. I'm not so concerned about how I'm going to do on home run setups and on, big super momentum days. I know that I will capitalize on those days. What I want to see, as I've mentioned in previous recaps, I want to see myself succeed and grind out wins out of a slow market and a dead market. And to be able to, read situations and make the most out of both sides. Regardless of whether it's a losing trade or a winning trade, I want to see myself make the maximum or lose the minimum. And even though I didn't exactly make the maximum today on my trades, I did do a heck of a lot better than I did yesterday. And the most important takeaway from that performance is that now I have the opportunity to go back into the market and to look for later in the day setups. My practice trades the other day, on Friday, I believe it was, my practice trades that I took when I got my internet upgraded, those went really well. And that's the kind of thing that I want to let myself take advantage of if ever the situation arises. Whereas on previous days, the last 2 anyway, I had to shut it down. I didn't let myself take any more trades in the simulator because of the way I behaved on my earlier trades. And in this case, I think that I performed better, not ideal, but I really like the fact that this day is not closed yet. It's afternoon now, and a couple hours from now, I'm going to reopen my broker, and I'm going to take a look at everything that's moving. And if something ideal sets up, then this day might go from being up 2.38% to being up 6 or 10%. Now, that's a little extreme. I'm not expecting that, but I may be able to double the P&L today, as I did on Friday with my practice trades. Friday, this one right here, yeah. I closed the day with $46 in gains, and then when I went back with practice trades later in the day, I added another $202 to that balance, and it didn't count for this balance because they were practice trades. But the reason that they were practice trades is because I had performed so badly in order to book this $46. If my performance was not awful on that day, I would have allowed myself to stay open like I am right now. And then maybe those trades that I'd found later in the day would have actually counted towards this balance. And this would have been, significant progress in the account. So this is the kind of thing I'm really looking forward to, is to be able to just be happy with my morning session enough to be able to open the afternoon up. Because up until now, I've been focused almost exclusively on the morning. I don't believe I've taken any afternoon trades in this account so far. Speaking of which, I have yet to show my trade log. So here's the updated trade log. Accuracy is getting a little bit better. These are the whole account results. There is a lot of green in here. So it's not huge streaks, but I'm not happy with the numbers coming off of here, like 510, 860, stuff like that. But I am happy with the losers for the most part. They're all double digits. The only 3-digit one I had was here, and then earlier in the account, the first trade up here. So I am happy about that trend. And I feel like having mornings like this are what's going to lead me towards having the bigger wins in the day and making more out of my time during market hours. So that's a wrap for me today, guys. I really hope I'll be releasing a bonus recap later tonight to cover the home runs that I will surely hit at the Power Hour. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't really think, there's going to be much. But if there is, I will let you know. I will always cover every trade in this account. So stay tuned, and until next time, happy trading.